US President Donald Trump is showing no sign of slowing his tariff spree. He now plans to impose levies of more than 10% on.
Donald Trump has launched his boldest global trade move yet. A flat 10% plus tariff on goods from over 100 smaller nations, including countries across Africa and the Caribbean.
Trump just dropped a game changer. Starting August 1st, over 100 small nations, including many in Africa and the Caribbean, will face a 10% tariff on all their exports to the US. This bold move could redraw the global economic map. Who stands to gain? Who's on the losing side? And is this the spark for a new trade war? Let's dive in and find out. Chapter 1. What did Trump announce? Let's dive right into some major trade news that's got people talking around the world. President Trump recently announced a major new trade policy that will have a real impact on a wide group of countries. Starting August 1st, 2025, the U.S. plans to impose a 10% tariff on imports from about 150 smaller countries, including many in the Caribbean, Africa, and Latin America. This affects nations that have often enjoyed special trade preferences or duty-free access to the U.S. market. Now, here's the important part. That 10% tariff isn't set in stone. If these countries don't come to the negotiating table or fail to meet specific U.S. demands, according to CNBC, that tariff could rise to 15 or even 20%. This is a significant development because it's a sweeping, uniform tariff with no special exemptions, and it takes effect in just weeks. Trump describes this move as a simple and fair way to fix what he sees as decades of unfairness, where the U.S. markets were wide open, but many smaller countries kept their own closed. This essentially ends many of the preferential trading arrangements these countries once relied on. Chapter 2. Why target small nations? You might be scratching your head and asking, why focus on small nations instead of zeroing in on larger, more powerful trade partners? Trump's key motivation centers on America's massive trade deficits, even with smaller countries that don't buy many U.S. goods, but flood American markets with cheaper imports. These smaller economies have had generous access to U.S. consumers, but didn't always reciprocate by opening their markets to American exports. In Trump's own words, "These were closed countries. Ours was open. Now, the playing field will be level." Essentially, he's calling out what he sees as an unfair trade imbalance. Instead of spending years negotiating separate trade agreements, country by country, the administration is applying a blunt force instrument, a flat tariff across the board affecting an estimated 150 countries. This one-size-fits-all tariff is designed to quickly reset the terms and pressure these nations into negotiating on American terms, or else face escalating tariffs. It's high-stakes gambling. Either these smaller countries negotiate quickly or deal with significantly higher costs. Chapter 3. How Africa and the Caribbean are affected. Now let's zoom in on two regions that this policy hits especially hard: Africa and the Caribbean. Many countries in Africa and the Caribbean have developed export markets in the U.S. for textiles, agricultural products, and raw materials, leveraging government trade programs designed to give them preferential access to the American market. For example, Ghana, Kenya, and Jamaica have all benefited from the African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA, which has allowed a wide range of products to enter the U.S. duty-free. These trade preferences have fostered steady growth in exports. But with Trump's new tariffs, that advantage is at risk of disappearing. Caribbean countries already struggling with inflation and a downturn in tourism could face serious job losses in farming, manufacturing, and artisanal crafts. Higher tariffs will likely make exports like cocoa, rum, sugar, and textiles more expensive and less competitive in the U.S. market. That means less demand for their products and squeezed incomes for local producers. Since the U.S. market often makes up the biggest chunk of exports for many African and Caribbean countries, these tariffs could slow or even reverse years of economic progress, impacting small business owners and workers across these regions. Chapter 4. Economic fallout for small nations. Let's talk specifically about what a 10% tariff really means on the ground for smaller economies. While 10% might sound modest to many, for small developing countries with tightly linked export markets, it's potentially devastating. This tariff will raise prices on goods like textiles, cocoa, sugar, and rum, making them more costly to American buyers. Higher prices make these products less affordable for U.S. consumers, which pushes demand downward. Lower demand means that exporters will receive less revenue, forcing them to possibly cut production. This decline can cascade into factory closures, layoffs, and broader economic distress. This is particularly true in sectors that do not have diverse employment opportunities, where job losses are more immediately felt by workers and entire communities. Many countries affected have limited alternative trading partners and rely heavily on exports to the U.S., often their largest consumer market. Losing duty-free access or facing these higher tariffs could stall economic growth, drive up unemployment rates, and push vulnerable populations deeper into poverty. This isn't simply about numbers on paper. It's about real people, families, workers, and communities experiencing greater hardship. The economic impact extends beyond statistics. It disrupts lives and threatens the social fabric of these nations. The livelihoods of millions, dependent on sustained market access, hang in the balance as tariffs jeopardize decades of progress. Chapter 5. Global Reaction. So how is the world reacting to these tariffs? The World Trade Organization has quickly condemned the move as unfair, warning that such action puts global trade stability at serious risk. This latest policy threatens decades of effort aimed at encouraging free and fair trade worldwide. Leaders from African and Caribbean nations have shown strong opposition, saying the U.S. is unfairly punishing developing countries for global challenges they had no hand in creating. As a result, several governments are threatening to file formal trade complaints or urgently seek tariff exemptions ahead of the August 1st deadline, as reported by the Times of India. Meanwhile, European allies and other U.S. partners are watching this situation closely with growing concern. There is genuine anxiety about whether they may be the next targets of Trump's expanding tariff strategy. This escalating situation reveals deepening tensions in trade diplomacy worldwide and raises tough questions about the future direction of American economic alliances. The ripple effects of this policy will not be confined to just these smaller nations. They will shape global trade dynamics for years to come, setting precedents smaller countries cannot ignore. The international community now faces an uncertain economic and diplomatic future, where long-standing cooperation may give way to competitive conflict. Chapter 6. Trump's bigger trade plan. This isn't just about small nations. It's part of a much larger global tariff strategy from former President Trump. He's made it clear that tariffs are a central piece of his economic and foreign policy toolkit. We've already seen him implement significant tariffs on Chinese goods, and he's openly hinted at even more, including potential retaliation against countries that continue to purchase Russian oil, regardless of global sanctions. This broad approach goes far beyond what we're discussing today. He's targeting everything from essential pharmaceuticals to advanced semiconductors. What's fascinating is his preferred method for engaging in trade. Instead of complex, multi-page traditional trade deals that take years to negotiate, Trump favors what he calls letters, simple, often one-page tariff agreements. For him, tariffs aren't just about revenue or trade balance, they're about leverage. And leverage, in his view, equals power. This isn't just about protecting American industries, it's about fundamentally reshaping global trade flows and ensuring that the U.S. has the upper hand in all economic dealings. It's a bold and unconventional strategy that prioritizes immediate, tangible pressure over long-term, multilateral negotiations. Chapter 7. Who wins, who loses? So, with this aggressive tariff strategy in play, who benefits and who gets hurt? Trump argues that American manufacturers and workers are the clear winners. The logic is straightforward. When tariffs make imported goods more expensive, US-made products become more competitive because they suddenly seem like a better deal. This, in theory, encourages domestic production, creates jobs, and boosts the American economy. He believes this puts American businesses on a more even playing field globally. However, there's a significant flip side to this coin. Consumers might end up paying more for a wide range of goods, especially imported foods and clothing, as the cost of tariffs gets passed down the supply chain. This could mean higher prices at your local grocery store or clothing outlet, directly impacting your wallet. Importers, small businesses that rely on international supply chains, and retailers could suffer, facing increased costs and potentially reduced sales. And globally, it's the smaller economies, like those in the Caribbean and Africa, that will lose out the most. They have fewer resources to absorb the costs or find alternative markets, making them particularly vulnerable to these economic shocks. Chapter 8. Will there be retaliation? So, what happens next? Will these targeted nations simply accept the tariffs, or will there be pushbacks? It's a complex situation with several possibilities. Some small nations might try to negotiate exemptions, hoping to prove their economic relationship with the US is unique or too vital to the tariff. Others, feeling unfairly treated, could decide to retaliate with tariffs of their own, though their economic leverage is often limited. Alternatively, many might turn to other global powers like China and Europe, seeking new trade deals and alliances to offset the US tariffs. This could lead to a significant realignment of global trade routes and partnerships. There's also a growing talk of regional alliances. Small nations, realizing their economic power is limited, could band together to push back collectively, forming stronger trade blocs. While these countries may not wield massive economic power individually, their political leverage, especially in global forums like the United Nations, could complicate things significantly for the US. This isn't just an economic chess match, it's a diplomatic one too, and the US could face increased diplomatic isolation if its tariff policy is widely seen as punitive and unfair. Chapter 9. Could this trigger a trade war? Here's the real danger, and what many economists and policymakers are increasingly worried about. If more tariffs follow, and if retaliation spreads beyond just a few countries, we could see the start of a full-blown global trade war. This isn't just a hypothetical scenario, it's a real risk. A trade war involving not just economic giants like China or the European Union, but now dozens of smaller nations, could create widespread economic instability. And with global supply chains already incredibly fragile and sensitive, as we saw during recent global events, a surge in tariffs could drive up prices worldwide, fueling inflation not just abroad, but right here at home. This would hit consumers hard, making everyday goods more expensive. It could also significantly slow economic growth across the globe, leading to recessions and widespread job losses. The interconnectedness of the global economy means that a trade war, once started, rarely remains contained. The economic consequences could be far-reaching and impact everyone, not just the nations directly involved in the tariff disputes. It's a very real threat to global prosperity. Trump's 10% tariff plan may seem small, but for many nations, it's a giant shock. It's more than just economics. It's a shift in global trade power. Will it bring prosperity back to American workers or destabilize fragile economies abroad? One thing's clear, the world is watching and August 1st is coming. If you find this video helpful, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Is this fair trade or just strong-arming the world? Thanks for watching.